Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack stacks of sources to find those knowledge nuggets you need to be well-informed without feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, think of it as your shortcut, really. Gaining depth and perspective on some fascinating topics, drawing key insights right from the material.
Absolutely. And today, we are doing a deep dive into a truly extraordinary source shared by a listener. It's an interview transcript featuring Brianna Lafferty and her, well, utterly unique near-death experience, or NDE. Our mission today is to guide you through this account, extract the core insights about consciousness, reality, and the incredible power that might just reside within us.
And the source material, it describes an NDE that was preceded by years, truly almost 2 decades of intense chronic illness, physical and psychological struggles, and even experiences that sound remarkably like spiritual warfare. It's a really powerful and challenging lead-up.
Right. But then the NDE itself, it transitions into these states of pure peace, love, and profound curiosity, which fundamentally shifts the whole narrative.
Yeah.
And crucially, it includes an experience of seemingly absolute knowledge of the universe, presented in a way that's just incredibly striking.
The host in the source interview was actually quite explicit about this. They said this particular account blew their mind, noting aspects they hadn't encountered in hundreds of other NDE accounts they'd reviewed or interviewed over the years.
Wow.
So that level of uniqueness really caught their attention immediately.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We'll journey through Brianna's difficult path, explore the distinct, potentially mind-bending phases of her NDE, and then dive deep into the aftermath and the profound implications she's drawn from it, particularly regarding the nature of reality and, the power within us.
Get ready for some surprising details, some potentially mind-bending concepts, and hopefully just enough clarity to keep you engaged as we navigate this complex and fascinating journey outlined in the source material.
Let's start by looking at the incredibly painful path that led Brianna to the threshold of this experience. The listener who shared this transcript was seeking thorough knowledge, and honestly, understanding the extensive context of her life beforehand is absolutely crucial to appreciate the magnitude of what followed.
It really does set the stage, doesn't it, for why this particular NDE account is so powerful. Brianna's journey with chronic illness began remarkably early, in childhood.
Yeah.
She noticed symptoms very young, feeling distinctly more tired than her peers. So much so that she initially thought other kids were just kind of faking being less tired than her.
She also began experiencing what she called these weird flickers, right? Involuntary movements that started in her arms, forearms, calves, hands, feet.
And these weren't just minor twitches either. They caused such severe cramping that she actually had to wrap her limbs in ace bandages just to manage the pain and the physical difficulty. It sounds awful.
Just awful. And these early symptoms weren't temporary. They progressed over a few years, sort of insidiously spreading to her other limbs and eventually even her head.
And along with the movement disorder, she developed debilitating nerve pain, severe insomnia, chronic depression, intense anxiety, and OCD. It wasn't just one thing. It was like a cascade of suffering across her physical and psychological being.
She used this incredibly vivid analogy, didn't she? Describing her body as a Christmas tree.
Yeah, that was striking.
Most bodies, she said, have solid strings of lights. Maybe pain shows up in one place, but it's contained. Her body, though, had blinking pain signals everywhere, constantly drawing her attention, causing distress. It really paints a clear picture of how pervasive it was.
And the medical struggle that followed was just as protracted and frustrating. She spent years being misdiagnosed, undergoing various treatments that often caused adverse reactions, requiring more medication just to counteract the side effects. She called it a waterfall of awful, which seems pretty apt. Each attempt to fix one problem just seemed to create several more.
And perhaps the most disheartening part, every single test she underwent came back normal. What initially felt like good news, ruling out scary stuff like cancer or a brain tumor.
Right.
That quickly became dreaded. Normal test results meant still no answers, no label, and crucially, no effective path forward for the intense, undeniable suffering she was experiencing daily.
The diagnosis finally arrived after 8 grueling years when she was 18 years old. It was myoclonus dystonia, a neurological movement disorder that is incredibly rare. The source notes that at the time, and even today, it's estimated to affect less than 1 in a million people, maybe only around 6,000 cases worldwide, just tiny numbers.
Wow. She received this diagnosis at a highly reputable hospital, and the neurological team, they were so unfamiliar with it that they actually wanted to study her case.
Yeah.
But despite that level of expertise, they couldn't offer any conventional treatment options beyond experimental brain surgery, which they weren't willing to perform on an 18-year-old. Understandably, maybe.
Right. So she was left, essentially, without any good medical options to alleviate her condition, just stuck.
And compounding all the physical and medical challenges were the difficulties of her teenage years and beyond. They had moved, right, to a rural community.
Yeah, which isolated her from a large group of friends she'd grown up with. So suddenly she's the outsider at school, facing bullying.
Yeah.
And she's constantly having to hide her symptoms, like wearing ASA bandages under her clothes or trying to play off her involuntary twitching by, like, fiddling with her hair or something.
Imagine the physical burden of constant pain and movement issues combined with that emotional toll, social isolation, bullying during such formative years. It's just a lot.
It really is. But despite these grim circumstances, the constant pain, insomnia, anxiety, depression, OCD, and the, total lack of hope offered by the medical system, she tried incredibly hard to live a normal life.
Yeah, that speaks volumes about her resilience.
Absolutely. Graduated high school early, went to college, moved out, bought and remodeled a house at 19.
At 19.
Yeah. Right. Worked her way up the corporate ladder. She was doing all the things society tells you are markers of success and normalcy.
That level of determination is truly remarkable, given the hand she was dealt. But the illness, despite some initial medical opinions that suggested it might not progress significantly, it just continued to worsen over the years.
Mm-hmm. And running parallel to this physical struggle was this really striking series of metaphysical and, paranormal experiences that began in childhood and continued into adulthood.
Okay, like what?
From a young age, she saw auras. She could perceive colors around people. Her mother apparently confirmed this was a gift, but advised her not to tell others.
Why not?
Likely due to the church and cultural beliefs they encountered at the time, which sometimes labeled such sensory or spiritual gifts as, demonic or something to be feared.
Right, that makes sense in some contexts.
She also saw darker things. While general ghost sightings didn't particularly bother her, she describes a profoundly disturbing experience involving an inanimate heirloom doll in her home.
Oh, creepy doll story. Okay.
Yeah, apparently it turned its head and looked at her with glowing red eyes, an image that scared her deeply and really left a lasting impression.
I bet. That's nightmare fuel.
Totally. And perhaps most strikingly, she repeatedly saw a distinct dark entity, which she referred to as the Top Hat Shadow Man.
Top Hat Shadow Man. Okay.
What makes this particularly compelling is that her sister and friends also saw this same entity independently in their childhood home.
No way.
Yes. And they didn't discuss it with each other until years later, after Brianna described it, they found validation in their shared, terrifying experiences.
How did she describe it? Like, what did it do?
She described it as mimicking people. Like, she'd see someone enter a room only to realize that person was actually standing right behind her in the room she just left. Really unsettling stuff.
Okay, that is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
And you said it gets more interesting.
Well, here's where it connects to something potentially much larger. Years later, when she was writing her book and researching some of these occurrences, she looked into this Top Hat Shadow Man. She discovered it's a well-known dark entity that is reported globally, often appearing to children, typically in basements, which is where she saw it.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah. That confirmation, she noted, was mind-blowing, connecting her isolated, frightening childhood visions to a recognized phenomenon in broader paranormal lore. That's pretty validating, even if terrifying.
Yeah, validating and terrifying. So you had this confluence of factors.
Right.
Rare, progressive, seemingly incurable illness, deep social isolation, the immense emotional and psychological burden, and these persistent, sometimes frightening paranormal experiences happening all at once for years.
Exactly. It's fertile ground for profound transformation, you could say, though an incredibly difficult one to navigate.
Which brings us to the final catalyst, right? The thing that directly preceded her NDE. By 2017, her illness was rampant again. She was living alone in San Antonio, Texas.
Mm-hmm. And nothing she had tried seemed to be working. Her mother, who's described as a warrior, just never gave up on finding answers for her daughter. She'd explored so many avenues over the years: Eastern medicine, Chinese herbs, various holistic practices.
So what do they try next?
In 2017, based on some theories they were exploring about potential root causes, maybe entity-related, they decided to try spirit release therapy, or SRT.
Spirit release therapy. Okay.
What's the idea there?
Well, The approach deals with the potential influence of entities causing illness or psychological issues. It focuses on what's described as oppression, where an entity is causing distress, nightmares, illness, rather than full possession, where an entity is like controlling a person's actions.
Got it. So they tried SRT, and the therapist wondered she might get a little sick afterwards, like a flu.
Yeah, like a minor flu, but Brianna's reaction was extreme. She got very sick for 3 full weeks, relentless vomiting, inability to hydrate or eat anything substantial.
3 weeks. Wow. Why such a strong reaction? She explains this intense physical response as a spiritual flu, which is a term used in some holistic circles for a physical reaction to massive energy movement or release within the body.
Right.
She compared it to the Feng Shui flu. Some people report after intensely moving stagnant energy in their home, or even the Dispenza influenza, that some experience after intensive meditation retreats involving significant energy work. It was seen as a sign that deep energetic shifts were occurring.
Okay, so she's already profoundly weakened by her illness. Then she gets this intense spiritual flu.
Yeah.
And then something else happened.
Yeah. While she was in this incredibly weakened state, the entities she felt had been attached to her since childhood times when she was, as she put it, a perfect target. Due to being weak, in pain, unsure of her power, they got super pissed off.
Pissed off? Why?
They were angered by her actively trying to claim her power, engaging in healing work that targeted their influence, and by her stated intention to no longer be afraid of them.
So they retaliated.
Exactly. They began by attacking her psychologically, intensifying the fear and distress. But over 3 straight days, this escalated into physical attacks.
Physical attacks? How?
The source doesn't detail the specifics, just that she experienced them as physical. She was on the phone with her mother, who was praying, while her parents were frantically booking flights to come to Texas. That sounds terrifying.
And her father apparently woke up during the night, hearing a voice he felt was God, telling him specifically that she was under demonic attack. The situation was clearly escalating on multiple levels.
Wow. So at 2 a.m., utterly exhausted after days of this relentless attack and the physical toll of her illness, she's on the phone with her mother. She told her mom she'd try to get some sleep, which she admitted was a lie, just so her mom could finally get some rest.
Okay.
After hanging up alone in her San Antonio apartment, everything within her just gave up. She reached the absolute limit of her endurance. Her heart, soul, mind, body all gave out simultaneously.
And she called out.
In her head, in her heart, everywhere at once, she called out with every last ounce of her being, "I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands." She didn't know exactly who she's calling out to, but she was just done. No energy left to fight or even endure. And in that very instant, the transition occurred. She describes feeling an immediate, profound shift. It felt like 100 physical boulders had been lifted off her chest simultaneously, and 1,000 stadiums filled with screaming fans had been instantly silenced. For the very first time in her life, she felt complete, absolute peace and serenity.
Total peace after everything.
Exactly. Then she heard a big booming voice. She wasn't sure if it was internal or external, but it distinctly asked her, "Are you ready?"
Are you ready? And what did she say?
Being in this unprecedented state of perfect peace, her immediate and instinctive response cried out from her soul was an unequivocal yes.
Yeah.
In that instant, after saying yes, she felt 3 hard pounds on her chest. That's when her physical heart stopped, and she felt herself leave her body.
Wow. That transition from decades of suffering, the attacks, the exhaustion, to that moment of absolute peace, the question, and that immediate yes. It's an incredibly powerful lead-in to the NDE itself.
It truly is. It makes you wonder about the role of surrender, maybe, and readiness in these kinds of experiences.
Absolutely. And what followed was the near-death experience itself, which, according to the source material, is particularly remarkable for its distinct phases and unique elements, especially these deep dives into the nature of knowledge, code, and reality creation.
Okay, let's walk through it phase by phase, just as it's described in the source. The initial state she found herself in was the blackness.
The blackness, not a void, she said.
Right. She initially called it the void, but clarified it wasn't an absence of anything. It was the opposite. It was everything. The source of every possibility, every single spark of creation existing in this state of pure potential.
And what did it feel like in there?
Within this blackness, she felt an overwhelming presence. Source, God, the universe, however you want to frame it. It felt profoundly like being home, accompanied by immense unconditional love and an equally immense curiosity about this state.
But she didn't remember being human.
No. In this state, her consciousness knew something drastic had changed. She wasn't suffering anymore, but she had absolutely no memory of her human form, Brianna, or her entire Earth experience. Her only conscious thought was a moment of inquiry. Am I dead?
And then the monks appeared.
Yeah,